to our site. So right now I'm going to be working on the eye that you see right over here in the photograph. I've already erased my grid lines, so I'm working with a clean sort of area. Again, just as I did in the past, I really want to keep the outlines of my eyes, my eyebrow, any of my facial features. I want to keep those lines really, really light. I don't want them to sort of stand out too much. I don't want it to look like there's just an outline around the face. Now, as I work towards the sort of forehead over here center, it's light, it's white, but out to the outside edges, it's a little bit darker. So I'm just going to lay down a little bit of pencil lead to create a base. And then as I come over here to do the eyebrows, I'm just going to kind of darken in the eyebrow a little bit just to give it a base sort of gray. I'm not going to make them nearly as dark as they need to be, but I do want to kind of put down a little bit of value. I'm going to continue with some of this value laying out in the gray, because when I look at this picture, really at no point do I really see bright white, except from maybe right there at the very top middle of the forehead, but there's basically gray almost everywhere else. I'm going to do this eye in, I don't know, maybe inside of 3-4 minutes. So I am working a little quicker and a little sloppier than I normally would. I just want you to keep that in mind when you're watching, that this is not my normal sort of meticulous care. And when you're working, you should take your time. Again, with the blending stump, I'm changing directions a lot, up and down, left and right, to kind of make sure that everything goes down nice and smoothly. You'll notice that things look like they get darker right away once I start blending. And again, I'm just putting down like a base sort of color for the eyebrow. I'm going to work my way around the orbital bone, seeing that it's a little bit lighter in the center over here, but definitely a little darker around the edges. A little bit darker over here where, you know, that sort of crease of the orbital bone meets where the nose starts happening. So I'm going to blend that in a little bit over there and just work in a little bit of this gray. The cheek is a lot lighter, so I'm not going to put much down there for right now. I can always come back later and sort of add more. I'm going to take a quick look, and I'm going to add just a little bit more here, what would be the temple of the head. And blend that in. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working on this eyebrow. What I want to do is I want to kind of darken up the eyebrow, and in this case I'm going to kind of darken it up by making marks that sort of go in the same direction as the hair of the eyebrow. So I'm just going to come in, darken it just a little bit, just so it stands out a little bit more against the skin, and then I'm going to blend that in lightly. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a little bit of line, and this is a great place to kind of get a nice sharp pencil, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of make these dark marks for the hairs of the eyebrow. I'm making them, I'm not like meticulously going into the photo and copying each and every last hair, but what I am doing is I'm trying to create marks that go in the same direction as the hair on the brow goes, to try to just, I mean, people are going to understand that that dark spot above your eye is an eyebrow, and they're going to understand the shape of it and where it goes. But, you know, what I really want you to get is that we want to hint a little bit at that sort of texture so people can see that, and we can get a lot of that without sitting there and like drawing each individual hair. So really what you want to do is you want to kind of look into your picture, and you want to be honest. Even though you may have black hair and your eyebrows may be very dark, in the picture there are dark parts and light parts and everything else that goes along with that. So with that, I'm not going to blend out what I just did. I wanted to kind of look a little bit rough and give me a little bit of texture, and I'll continue that out on this outside part. Again, just trying to go with exactly what I see in the picture. And this is almost the same concept and idea around doing the hair, which is what I did yesterday. Is I created shading that matches the hair, and then what I did is I filled in texture, mark making that sort of you know, spoke to the texture and the sort of move of the hair. So again, all the skin area, I'm going to kind of make sure that I'm blending in carefully, and I'm going to work from there. Now, it's a careful thing I want you to do, not to outline things, but even with that said, there are some little natural outlines one of which being the crease on your eyelid. So, you know, that is one of the places where a little bit of an outline is going to have to happen. Now, the worst thing you can do with the outline is just make it one dark, heavy line. You really want to kind of look to the picture and see where you see light and you see dark. You also want to try to get a little bit of that shading that you see in the actual eyelids in the picture. Now is the time to do it before you add too much detail, because once you start adding the detail, it gets very difficult to get down in there and do like some blending. So you can see me add a little bit of that darkness right now. The next place where I would say, well, we can almost do a little bit of an eye outline, or close to an outline, is going to be for the lashes. I would tell you, ladies especially, don't get in there and start drawing individual eyelashes right off the bat. You're going to make yourself look like Minnie Mouse, and you know, maybe that's something that you're into and you want to look like a cartoon character. But for most of you, what I would tell you to do is start just by filling in the darkness over here. You see that there is a lot of heavy sort of shadow right on the edge of that as far as where the eyelashes would go. We'll add little details after the fact. I can kind of work a little bit of that into the corners as well. When I look at her actual eye, the white part of her eye is not actually bright white in the picture. In fact, the edges are a little bit grayer even than as you go out to the middle. So what I want to do is I want to add a little bit of that value, and then I'm going to look into the eye. You want to try to find any and all little value or changes that you can. You know, when I'm looking at the picture, I see the tiniest of tiny little reflections in there. And for me, the center is a little bit darker. And when I say center, I'm not talking about drawing just a black circle in the middle over there. You know, it's very hard in this picture to see much of a difference between her iris, the color part of her eye, and the pupil, which is the black dot in there. But there is a subtle little difference, and I'm going to kind of make that happen in my picture without making it just a black circle. That would be, again, making yourself look a little cartoonish. I'm going to fill in there and fill in on that sort of corona, the sort of outside edge of the iris, and then I'm going to just blend that in a little bit, you know, to try to get a little bit of a sense of what's going on with that eye. And I'm going to definitely take a little bit more gray, and you know, you can see there's some more shadow on that upper part of the white eye. Once that's blended, I'll darken it up. I'll work on some of that little corner again. And I think if you remember from the video I posted of drawing my wife's eye, you know, I spent like 30 minutes on that eye. Now, this is obviously considerably quicker, but that doesn't, I'm only doing that for the sake of trying to get a few of these things done during the period. So, you know, your job is to really take your time. From here, if I feel pretty good about this, I would never add eyelashes until I really felt like I was almost done. And the only reason I'm adding a couple here is because there are a few pretty dark ones. And again, the worst thing you can do with eyelashes is make them up. You know, and I'm just going to put a dark line here and here and here and here and make just a pattern of it. Again, that's going to make you look like a cartoon character, but you can hint a little bit at what you're seeing in the picture. Same thing on the lower lid. I wouldn't do the lower lid lashes unless I really finished all my shading here. And again, we have a little bit of shadow on the under part of the lower lid. And again, even in the crease, it's almost like a little line in here. You can always take your eraser, or try to take your eraser, and bring back some of the lightness that you might see in the corner. I could go on this eye for a while and work on it a lot more and add a ton more little detail, a little shadow. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip over that and start working on one of the noses on my next drawing. So that would be how I would start that eye, and obviously there's a lot more time I can work on it, but that would be stage one. To a mouth, nose and a mouth. I'm going to skip over the glasses part of this one, and I'm going to just go right into the nose itself. Again, we're going to want to get rid of grid lines. All right, something that a couple of you I saw when you submitted your work, there was still grid lines in there. Make sure as you're working that you erase your grid lines. And then in this picture, it's a little bit lighter, obviously, than the last one. But we have, really on this nostril over here is a great example of implied line. And when I talk about implied line, what am I talking about? I'm talking about the fact that it's a light gray, light to dark gray up here on the sort of crease of the nose, and then some in and around your actual nostril. But the nostril really stands out to us because it's a nice crisp edge there. I did not go do this with a real dark heavy outline. That dark heavy outline would really have ruined it. Now, where would you have an outline? Well, right over here maybe where the dark part of the nostril is, but again, it's really all about just creating a nice crisp edge there. And then with just the pencil lead that's already on my blending stump, I'll start to kind of put in a little bit of that like grayish shading that you're going to see underneath there. I think that it's just a little bit darker on the underneath part of this. And it's a careful balance of not putting in like a heavy outline at one point, but at the other point is also kind of using the shades of gray and even your eraser to make a nice little edge. I'm not going to add pencil lead here for that really soft gray. You can see this part of the nose is really white, but to transition over to the shaded side, I'll just use a little bit of the gray that's already on my blending stump just to get started, to give it just sort of a base coat of value. But then I'm going to look at the far side of this nose. We really need a little bit more shadow. And again, the nostril, this is a place where people can't resist outlining it. Again, we want the subtle implied lines. And the implied line, again, is just a dark value right up against a light value. Just like here with the nostril, it just is more pronounced when you look at how dark I'm making that part. But it's all just about having a clean edge and not just outlining. The outlining is all great for comic books, for cartoons, and for that kind of artwork. And you know, some of that stuff looks really cool, and I like drawing a lot of that myself. But really what we want to get out of this class and in the drawing and painting is that sensitivity towards subtle changes between light and dark and translating that value to my picture. So, you know, again, I'm not going to go through the entire cheek here in the glasses, obviously, but I think you're already starting to see how I've defined the nose without necessarily sitting there and very meticulously outlining it and using really heavy black line, which is the antithesis of what we're trying to do, which, you know, for anybody who's wondering, means opposite. SAT word. So I'm going to work a little bit on the shadow underneath here, falling into the mouth, and then I think this is an opportunity for me to work on the lip. Again, the dirt that I'm going to have, the lead that's actually picked up on my blending stump, is perfect for those super light grays. The really, really light grays are some of the toughest ones to make, and sometimes to make it you need to kind of, you know, have a really either soft touch or a semi-used blending stump. You know, I could shade half of his face really using that super light gray that is on my blending stump to just kind of set that up. And when I use that little gray, you can see that makes like the white spots of the picture really stand out. As for the mouth, this is another area where people can't resist kind of outlining it really heavily. But if you notice like the lips in the photograph, his upper lip really stands out against his skin because it's just a nice dark value with a nice sharp edge around it. And that edge is really sort of clean and really sort of helps define the picture. Now, we can't really draw without line. I mean, it kind of ends up being just looking like a cloud. But you can see right over here how I've sort of minimized the effect of an outline over here while still making the lips look completely defined. Here is where I'd start working on some of the darker shadow and really think of it more as adding darker shadow rather than, again, outlining it. It's just that sort of crease that sort of stands out because, again, the implied darkness of the lip below it. and I'll blend some of that in. Again, if you go back to my other video that I'm working on, the piece, ultimately that I would like to frame and hang up, I could spend 20, 30, 40 minutes just working on the lips. I mean, there's so much information as far as I'm concerned in there to kind of get. I don't expect you guys to put that kind of time in there, but I do expect you guys to try to find those little subtle little variations. I'm just going to make that a little sharper for you. And as for the lower lip is way, way lighter. Generally with the light coming from above, you're going to almost find that in every drawing. This is a place, again, where I would use a little bit of my gray on my blending stump to sort of get a little bit of that information in there. And then with that, I would tell you like this is like little creases and things like that are in the mouth. Hey, as much as you can draw that looks good is a good idea, but I really don't need you to come in there and like carefully draw every last little crease. You can even see what I'm doing. Just a couple little hints at them really gives the mouth a little bit of texture. Now, hey, I've been doing this longer than you, and I'd like to think that I'm pretty good. You don't need to go that crazy on it, but realize that if you do too much or you make it too dark, you're going to make your mouth look like it's got a really chapped lips. So don't overdo it. I'm not going to finish this mouth completely, and I could come back in here and do so much more work as far as making things darker and messing with them a little bit more, but that would be a nice little nose and a mouth for you. I'm going to switch over to one more. I think I've got about 6 minutes left to class. So with that, you're going to get a nice 6-minute nose. With this one again, let's erase our lines. I'll pull up the picture and bring that up. Get rid of your lines. This one, I'm gonna rush it a little bit, but when I look at my picture, I don't have a lot of white at all. Everything, even at its lightest, to me in this picture, has sort of a light gray overtone. Now there's a couple little highlights that for me really wouldn't stand out without adding a little bit of gray, because that way I can't erase into this thing without a little bit of gray. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of give myself a light gray base to work on. And again, we'll see, you can see how light I've kind of kept all my marks over here. So for this nose, how do I get this nostril to stand out? Well, that nostril stands out because the area behind it is just a little bit darker. I mean, it's a subtle variation, but it is an important one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of carefully add a little bit more, realizing that I can always make it darker. I might cheat a little bit and make it just a little bit darker than I think, but I want to do that to kind of make the nostril stand out on that side. What I don't want to do is just go with a dark, heavy black outline and just kind of like say, okay, well, there's the nostril. And you can see with that little bit of value change over there, I've already started to sort of sculpt that side of the nose without going over here and just doing like a dark, like, hey, parentheses over here to fix the nose up. Darkest part of this picture at this point is really right in here in this nostril. So I'm gonna get in there. I'm gonna add a little bit. I want to blend some of that in and then just pull some of that down in and around to kind of create the softness of that shadow and what's happening on the lower part of the nose over here. All right. When I look over here, I've got a little bit of light gray that starts happening right in here, and I've got definitely some more gray right on the lower part of the lower tip of the nose. To make that stand out, you can see again we've got a little bit of shading that happens right underneath that part, and without adding a little bit more gray, we'll never quite get that. So again, I'm going to kind of blend that in. Maybe I went just a little bit darker than I should have right there, but more importantly than that is that I didn't come in there with a dark, heavy outline. I'll kind of do this nostril right now, which again, look in your picture and realize that it's smaller than the other side. It's a little bit different. I'm going to blend that in, and just the same way as I did the last nostril on the opposite side, this side just requires a little bit more gray, and that gray is going to go up a little bit higher and define that side of the nose. I'm not going to go too dark, and most importantly, the main objective of this was not outlining it. So I'm going to go through with that, and if I start to lose the edge a little bit of this nostril, I can kind of come back with my eraser and kind of help shape it up a little bit. All right, and again, I have a little bit more gray on the tip of the nose. And really that little bit of white right there with my eraser, and a little bit there with my eraser, and I've almost got that one in there. I told you it would be a 6-minute nose. That was a 5-minute nose, so for anybody who is paying attention. All right, so if these happen to be any of your facial features, you just got a free tutorial on how to do them, or to have something over there. Again, I'm going to post this once the video uploads to our site, so we can take a look at it on Teams. If you want to screenshot it now, you can. If you want tomorrow for me to do your nose, eyes, or mouth, or any other part, an ear, a chin, or whatever, please just put a request in the chat.